Everyone. Hi, everyone. So my name is Hannah. I'm one of the directors here, part of the Markham Unionville Provincial Liberal Association. I'm also a recent graduate from York University's Health Studies program, and I'm really excited that you all could make it. So today we're going to be talking about the Ontario Liberal Education Recovery Plan. It's presented by the Markham Unionville PLA as well as the SGPLA. And we're really glad all of you guys can make it. And some of my fellow directors from the MUPLA are here as well. So yeah, let's get started. So first off, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Mitzie Hunter, who's the MPP for Scarborough-Guildwood and the former Minister for Education and Ontario Liberal Finance Critic. And Mitzie, if you'd like to say a few words.
Sure. Thank you so much, Hannah. Good evening, everyone. It's an important day to talk about education, in fact, because it is the last day of school. And I'm sure you all remember how that feels, the euphoria on the last day of school. And certainly our students have had quite the year. It's been really, really challenging for students, regardless of the grade level, weathering the pandemic while continuing and pursuing their learning. And so, every year in a child and a student's life really, truly matters. And so the 18 months or more that we've spent in the COVID pandemic has had a profound effect on Ontario's young people. And as we look forward, we have to think about those learning gaps and how are students going to catch up and make up from the gaps that have occurred in their learning. There were students that had certain aspects of learning gaps before COVID, and those have only been exacerbated under the lockdown and the various types of learning, the hybrid learning, the online learning, and in some parts of the province, largely in-person learning. So one of the things that we promised in Ontario, and certainly we did as Liberals when we were in office, is that public education would be something that is equitable and accessible to students regardless of where they live. And we should not see inequalities in our education system. So that's something that in a post-pandemic society we have to continue to fight for, is investment in public education. And as I say that, this is an important day. It's the last day of school. Students and educators and parents are looking for that break, because parents actually in many instances became the first support for education this year, as many students were at home learning. But on this day, you would have expected a significant announcement from the Minister of Education and from the Ford government when it comes to preparing for a smooth transition back to school. But we didn't hear that. Instead, we heard that, we'll tell you what our plan is in a few weeks. In a few weeks, it's going to be back to school. It's going to be too late. It's going to be just as the announcement of planning for outdoor graduation 3 weeks before graduations were actually due, and not recognizing that the school system needs time to plan, and it doesn't just turn on a dime because an announcement is made. And so that was profoundly disappointing today, that there was no plan, no priority for education, and of course the Indigenous curriculum and the need for that to be a mandatory part of our education system is so obvious today. And it was something that was, under Premier Kathleen Wynne, it was part of our response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report that was put forward. And that we were working on a curriculum that was led by Indigenous educators, and it was all set to go. But in 2018, Premier Ford canceled that. It just canceled it, didn't care that there was a lot of investments made, didn't care that people were already on their way. They had booked hotels for the launch of this writing program, and they just didn't care. And now, more than 3 years later, you know, both the Premier and his Education Minister have no response when it comes to making Indigenous education a mandatory part of our curriculum. And so I believe as Ontario Liberals, we are the party of education. We are the party that brought in full day kindergarten. We are the party that invested in early learning and childcare. You know, one of my responsibilities is as finance critic for the party and our caucus. And just recently, a report came out on how many childcare spaces were built. And, you know, of the, I'm going to give you a rough number, say 29,000 childcare spaces were built over the last number of years. Only 900 were built under the Ford government. All of the other spaces were created because of the leadership of Premier Wynne and her team. And so, you know, we really do have a platform to run on in the next election in terms of our commitment to education. Stephen Del Duca and members of our party have, and our co-chairs for the platform have put out an amazing manifesto for education. And I hope you take the time to read it. It's online on the OLP website. And you will be proud of this party. You'll be proud of Stephen as the leader of this party. You'll be proud to knock on doors in Markham Unionville and to talk about the commitment that Ontario Liberals have to public education and the investments that we want to make. We're not building, you know, useless highways that no one wants, that paves over green belts and farmland in terms of Highway 413. We would cancel that project and instead invest $8 billion in Ontario's public education system that is so needed at this time. So I want to commend the Markham Unionville Provincial Liberal Association. You passionately pursued this topic of an education roundtable. I don't know if you timed it for the last day of school, but I just feel that this is such a critical conversation at a critical time in Ontario, and it's one in which that certainly that your candidate and the party can run on in the 2022 election. So I'm just really happy to join you. I'm looking forward to the panel discussion tonight and just hearing, you know, what is on people's mind when it comes to education. I've been talking to teachers, I've been talking to parents and students, and my sense is that everyone recognizes that there is a learning gap that has been developed, but they don't see that the investments are being made to close that gap and to support students. And I think that that's something that we should be demanding from this government. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to Hannah.
Yeah, Hannah. Hi, guys. So
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mitzie, for those words. That was great. And we also have here our co-host, Kadira Jackson, who's the president of the Scarborough-Guildwood PLA. So if you'd like to say a few words, Kadira.
I just want to thank Jan, the president, and the Markham Unionville PLA for inviting me to co-host with you. Just a little bit about me. I am a lawyer. I've been practicing for over 10 years, and I used to be a social worker. I'm a counselor with the Professional Engineers Ontario, and a mother and a wife. I have 2 young children, and I wear a lot of hats, and I'm just happy to be here to co-host. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And now I'm going to go through and introduce our panelists. So when I introduce you, maybe if you could just say hi. So the first one is Nasim Alvi, so York Region Elementary School teacher.
Hi guys, I'm Nasim. I am currently working, I currently finished today, grade 5 EVS, that's online learning. And I got transferred, I guess, in October, and I started doing that. So I went from grade 2 to grade 5. And so yeah, I've been working with the York region for the past 10 years. And I'm looking forward to speaking tonight.
Perfect, thank you so much. So next we have Mirza Rahman, Toronto District School Board Secondary School teacher.
Hello, everyone. I'm a high school teacher. I teach, this year I've been teaching French, and it's been quite the challenge. And like Mitzie said, how appropriately this was timed for the last day of school. It's been quite interesting because we've had a whole mishmash. We've had in school, we've had online, we've had a hybrid, and it was going back and forth throughout this whole pandemic. So it's been quite the challenge, and it's going to be interesting to see how things progress with the upcoming year.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Christopher Premdas, the Second and Policy Chair of the SGPLA.
Yes, hi there. Thank you for inviting me. I also wanted to say that I'm also a secondary school teacher for the Toronto Catholic District School Board at St. John Paul II. I'm a resource teacher. And one of the interesting things that I did see today was it was our graduation, and it was all done online. So kind of like imagine the time when, you graduated, when you had to cross over that stage and collect that diploma. In effect, what we saw here were, it was beautifully choreographed, mind you, but it really captured the experience, but not so much the essence of the experience. So thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have a few questions over here. So Kadir and I will just take turns asking each question. And so I have questions for our panelists and then one for Mitzie. So what I can do is I can either say the name if you guys would prefer, or if the teachers, would you guys want me to ask you specifically, or do you think like it would be better if one of you answered depending on the question? Okay, or I'll just ask based on, I'll just assign them. I think that'll work best. Okay, so the first question we can ask for Mirza. So if Ontario makes online learning a permanent solution, what would be some of the effects on students? So lack of socialization, interaction.
If this goes through as a permanent solution, then the first thing we'd have to look at is how equitable it would be. For example, I've had a lot of students this year who in the beginning they had lack of resources like computers, and then when they did get access to computers, they had lack of internet capacity. So they were always going in and out, missing words that I was like on the average they'd be missing, maybe 30%, 40% of the classroom time. So that's one thing. The other thing, the interaction. Like I said, being a French teacher, it's all about teaching in a communicative approach. And in order for me to do that, when you're teaching a language for the first or any time, a lot of it comes from facial expressions, body gestures, and things like that. And I don't know how much attention I'm getting from the students because they're not required to put on their camera, right? And because of that, they're not interacting with me, they're not interacting with other students, so it's really hard to really grasp the full aspect of learning.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. Okay.
So I'm not sure how I forgot to mention, but I did work in an elementary school as a social worker. And so this next question is about, we want to know like what are students missing from in-person learning? I saw firsthand how important it is for them to socialize and how much fun it is for them to be with their peers. And because of the fact that I worked in elementary school, I want to hear from Nasim as an elementary school teacher. What are students missing from in-person learning?
Well, from my personal experience this year, I think they're hugely missing the socialization aspect of things, the social interaction. Some of these, you have to understand that some of these kids are only children. Some of them have no outside contact, and this was their only form of socialization. And in spite of that, they were not required to have their cameras on, so they were more reclusive. They're just the group work, everything that you do in person, the building blocks of growing up, socializing with people, learning how to interact with people, it wasn't happening. I mean, to some extent it did happen. I mean, we had breakout rooms and we were able to forge some sort of relationship, but at the elementary level, depending on what grade they're in, I think that parents can choose and or because of consequence will be involved or won't be involved in their children's education. And because of that, if a child is in a room by themselves for a good portion of the day with their different tabs open. I mean, you can, as a teacher, I could see when they did have their cameras on, you could see the reflection of the video games in the background, and they didn't think I knew, but of course you see that happening, and you see that they're not paying attention. And a huge problem I found was when I addressed them, some of them, they were not following along at all. And because they're distracted, of course, they're only 10 or 11 years old. They were distracted and they had no clue what was going on. And I think it just negatively affected them in such huge ways. Mostly socially, when they go back, they will have social issues because often you're telling them, you know, if we were face to face, you couldn't ignore me. You'd have to respond. You couldn't hide behind a screen, right? You couldn't type your answer in. You had to actually respond as a relationship. So moving forward, how are they going to build these relationships? Some of them are going to feel anxious because they haven't been exposed to this for a long time. There's so many negative effects of being online that I think that they're going to be going into, and that's going to just increase the gaps that are already there.
Thank you for that, Nasim. Very much hoping and thinking positively that they can recover from this. So similarly, we were talking about some of the concerns from a relationship standpoint. What are some of the health and safety concerns with the online learning? And I will ask Chris this question, please. You're on.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the, a lot of observations and studies have shown that, the school closure has sort of like, undermined the in-person school. And, but sometimes you don't even know what's really happening behind the screen as well, too. I found that, again, like everything else, very few would actually have their screen open, right? So sometimes you don't know really what's happening really in the background as well, too. So there might be, mental or physical issues there as well, too. And you can't really tell because in school, the educator is the first one to kind of see if there's, been a case of, child abuse. For example.
So just to follow up and to add to that, Chris,
Sure.
What's like, do you know how much screen time children are supposed to have? And do you think that this is an issue for them being online this long?
Well, we were in a quadmester system, right? So it was, 10 weeks. So it was approximately like 2.5 hours, I should say. Right. It might be a little bit different in elementary because you actually had to teach them throughout the whole day. But in secondary, it was 2 subjects, 2.5 hours in the morning, and they would get that break in between, and then another 2.5 hours in the afternoon as well. So. So I think that's, some people are, we could also say that, there were perhaps, I would say perhaps maybe a few students who may have benefited off the remote learning. And that's, of course, those who may suffer from a little bit of anxiety or experience any type of bullying as well, too. But one of the other things that I've noticed is that perhaps there was a greater connection as well too between the educator and the parent. So So speaking to a few teachers, I was, as a spec ed teacher, I was there to sort of like support my students as well too. So sometimes I would be sort of like added to the class. So that was also a a positive thing. But for the most part, I think there was a general, as was mentioned over here, an overall loss, which when you start thinking about those students, and even pre-pandemic time, um, suffered from a gap as well too. Those learning gaps.
I
Okay,
can imagine that in addition to the anxiety, there'd probably be a lot of depression as well.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you guys for that. We're just gonna move on to the third question. So this one I'm gonna ask Mitzie. So what are some of the health and safety concerns with online learning? So either too much screen time, privacy issues, and so students getting a chance to connect with other peers. So how can we go about that in the fall? And also like, what would that look like?
You're on mute, Mitzie.
Anna, you didn't hear what I said. I said I'm hoping for an in-person learning in the fall. I believe in our public education system. I believe in the equity that's built into the public education system. As I'm listening to these teachers speak and answer, the questions that are being put forward to the panel, I think about that. There are students who they look forward to going to school because it is their safe place. It is a place that they feel safe, that they feel, at their best. And students have had to, many students, particularly in the COVID hotspot areas, like in my community in Scarborough, have had to, be away from that environment for so long. So my hope is that this government will invest in our public education system to make sure, first and foremost, that it is safe, that teachers, all of the support staff and staff in the schools, as well as students, are able to return safely for in-person learning with adults in the room, all of those educators who are invested in their learning and in their supports. There's going to have to be a lot of assessment that occurs. How do we know how students are truly doing if they're hiding behind screens? Many students, for lots of reasons, there are some students who might feel shy about their environment at home, and they therefore don't want to turn the screens on. And so, we need to do all that we can to have that safe back to school, and it's going to need more resources. Some of the resources that I'm hearing are needed are tutors to help students perhaps to catch up on areas that they might have lagged while being away and doing online remote learning. And other resources in the school, maybe mental health resources as well. There are some students who are afraid. Think of our young children. We've been telling them about COVID and that there's this threat to their health, and in terms of going inside and gathering, and they might be afraid of school at this point. And so how do we reintroduce the school environment with the required supports so that all students can learn fairly and equitably in our province? And it is going to require investments in the education system in order to do that. If we have to have some degree of online because there's a fourth wave, then of course I know that the boards and the schools will be prepared for that, and we've already weathered 18 months of this already, and so I know that they will be prepared for that and to do their best. But I believe that the best place for students is in-person learning, and as we introduce online as an innovative way to teach. It's not because we want to save money on the backs of our students. It's because it is the best thing for their learning outcomes and the pedagogy of learning. And that's some evidence that the minister and his team need to start sharing with parents and with students and with schools, so that we know why he is so focused on online.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, I did my 4th year of undergrad online. I've been in my 3rd year, and I would say, like, it was hard as an undergrad student, but I can only imagine what students are going through. It's really important. Students can return, and also like keep, a lot of the students transitioning from high school to university, like that's a very big learning curve, right? And so a lot of the students who last year in grade 12, they had it online. This year, first year was online, and probably second year, right? So I think it's important too that, all of these kids, like whether it be high school, undergrad, elementary, we're, getting back to in person as safely as we can, and making sure we are getting that socialization that's, so vital for our learning experience.
And Hannah, while there's a health risk,
Yeah,
of course, we have to keep everyone safe and be at home as much as possible. But to the degree that we are through the pandemic, people are vaccinated, we're doing good testing and screening, we should be investing first in opening schools. I appreciate being on a patio. I was just on a patio before coming on this panel, but it is more important to me to see the students and the young people in Ontario in school learning.
for sure, for sure. Thank you so much. So I'll let Kadira take this question.
So this next question, I'm going to ask Nasim, just because you did mention some issues about inequality. How has remote learning impacted marginalized and vulnerable communities?
I think that that we touched upon this a little bit, but some kids, they are living in their living situation. They may be living in places that maybe they don't want everyone to see. Not only that, maybe they're in small rooms where everybody, the whole family is confined with them. And I had the experience of asking someone to, and I felt so bad, but I asked someone, I said, it would be really great to hear your voice rather than you typing your answer in. And then he turned on his mic, and I heard so much background noise. And then I felt bad. I thought, oh my gosh, we don't know what these kids are experiencing. We don't know what their backgrounds are. We don't know anything about them. Like the kids that I had were from all over York Reach, all over Markham. None of the kids were from my school. None of the kids knew each other. And so aside from the socialization that they don't have, the other part of where they're from, we don't know where they're from. We don't know what their situation is. We don't know anything about them really. And the kids that do have these gaps because they didn't have a computer, or because their internet keeps cutting out, or whatever other reason, they're alone at home, their parents have to work, it does impact them, and in a negative way, because we're not there to offer instinctive approaches to dealing with them, right? We, as teachers, we usually can read a child by looking at them and interacting with them on a daily basis, face to face. But online, we don't see that. So we don't know the challenges that they're experiencing. And those vulnerable kids will get lost in the gaps. And another experience, I don't want to take up too much time with this question, but another small experience that I did have was I had 3 kids this year that I had to bring to in-school team to get assessments for, because they were struggling so much. And I looked and I saw some of their previous report cards online, and I was able to see that, yes, this is a pattern, but those kids, and they're always the quiet ones, they get lost in the gaps, and nobody realizes it. And then they get pushed on, and these gaps keep increasing and increasing. And I think that being online for those kids is a detriment. It's horrible for them, I think, in my opinion.
But also, can I just ask a follow-up to Nasim? The UN Declaration for the Rights of the Child is that they have a right to thrive and to learn. it is part of their inherent right. And it is up to the provincial government and its jurisdictional responsibility to provide a good quality education for every child in this province, right? Our 2 million students.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, pushing students online, how is that fair and equitable? You know, when we're supposed to be investing a certain number of dollars per student to provide a learning environment that's fair and equitable, if you're now pushing them, you know, each individual student into their own homes, where is that obligation as a society for our young people, that we give them an environment that they can thrive? And I think that this is a very dangerous direction that is, you know, it's sort of creating inequities in our system of education in Ontario that we fought so hard to, you know, to make it more equitable over the years.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys. And you know, a lot of the times I've heard, like, you know, on the news too, that the schools, even in the US, they say this too in some of the areas, that the school should be, you know, the first to open and the last to close. And I think that's really important too, because students, they really need this. And, you know, like when you're doing it online, even I've seen videos, there's a lot of kids who like were in 3rd grade and then they showed how they progressed, and some of them needed like a lot of extra help. And when they went from, you know, online to in person, then teachers had to, like, you know, catch up and help work on those skills. So I think it's really important that we're talking about this today. So the next question here that I have is, what plans are in place to support students struggling in destreamed math classes this fall? And I'll turn it over first to Mirza, and then Chris, if you wanna also maybe talk about this.
What plans are to support? In terms of online, I'm not too sure, to tell you the truth. I know that they'll have resources within the school, but I really can't answer how the destreamed math classes will be this year. It's going to be quite interesting because, like I said, going back to teaching French, you've got all these different levels coming into one. And with the grade 9s this year in the math classes, it's going to be all over the place, and it'll be quite the challenge, especially with the online. In person, going back to everything we've said, you'll get those resources, you'll get the help, but I'm not sure what's going to happen with the online. Maybe Chris can help me out with this one.
Yeah, well, if it goes back to the quadmester system, I think it's going to be a real challenge, or for that matter, even online. But I do think there has been some professional development days to do the destream math for the math teachers, because it's been done in a very long time. So you know, and I would also think that there should be, if you're struggling with the destream math, there should also be, you know, tutors available. And I normally what schools generally do is that they have what they call a student success team. So around you know, midterm or close to report card time, teachers would normally just send out an early warning letter or a concern, and we would try to catch those gaps as well too. So yeah, I think there's been a lot of concern over the destream math, but I think overall, when you destream the math, then you're you know, you're combining really strong, motivated students with some of the more needier ones as well too. So it's still, destream math is sort of like kind of still teaching the intermediate grades, except in high school, right? So it just continues on from grade 9, 10, like they did it in grade 8.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, going forward, we probably do need, like you said, like more tutors, because this definitely will be a change for, you know, not only the teachers, but for the students as well going forward. And I think it's important that, you know, the government does realize that, you know, this is a big change, and that support systems do need to be in place for, you know, all of the students. So yeah, that's great. Thank you guys. And now I'll turn it over to Kadira.
Thank you. So I'm gonna give this one to Mirza, and anyone else can chime in. It's a very basic question, but what has been the biggest challenge you've had to overcome while teaching remotely?
I think I think everybody's contributed to this one. Um, the biggest challenge was basically getting their attention. We try to make things interactive. We try to uh, have collaboration, cooperation, communication, but a lot of them are very silent. And it's very frustrating when you're trying to reach out to the class and you call upon a student and they don't answer. And you wait for them and they don't answer. And 2 minutes later, they're like, "Oh, were you calling me? I just had to go get breakfast. I just had to take care of my sibling. I had to do this for my parents." There's so many distractions in the home that you have no control over. And it's not necessarily the student's fault because they're in the home and sometimes the parents take that for granted, right? A lot of them are, like Nasim said, a lot of them are learning in an environment where the siblings are also learning at the same time. So you've got a lot of background noise. A lot of them might be living in multi-family dwellings. So you've got generational um, communication or situations there where that might be causing a lot of distraction. You've got so many distractions, and with going back to being having the focus with the camera not being on, you can't tell what's going on, right? So that's basically the biggest thing, having the distraction. When all of them are in one classroom, at least you have some kind of control, you have interaction, you have face to face, you can tell or you can guide your class the way you want it. But with the online, you don't know who's there physically, mentally. They're all over the place. And you will have those students who are your stories. They'll be engaged at all times because they'll be communicating, whether it's, even if their cameras are off, they'll be communicating by speaking out, they'll be responding in the chat. But for those other kids who aren't those kind of students, the ones that tentatively or more, they would be the kind of kids that sit in the back of the class normally, right? They'll just try to dwindle in the background and not be seen or heard, and then that's because of their personality. But in order for you to make sure that they're accessing the knowledge that you're trying to teach them, you want to have their attention, and by them being distracted all the time, it doesn't help.
And I think for sure, in addition to that is the lack of accountability. When you're dealing with teenagers, they're going to push boundaries. I happened to be at my sister's house when her 16-year-old was doing a class, and she said that the teacher asked them to respond to a question. She was the only one that responded. So, I mean, I'm assuming a lot of them were distracted and not paying attention. So I can see how that's a huge issue. Does anyone else want to chime in on what's been the biggest challenge for you?
I'll say something. I think that assessments were a big challenge as well. Just because online, there's only so much assessment that you can do for a teacher, because marking is an issue, right? Marking everything, 30 kids online, marking is not easy, and it's very time consuming. Making sure they have the right programs that we're using. And another huge challenge, especially at my grade level and younger, I would say reading assessments. Like the reading, these are formative years where they should be learning how to be fluent and comprehension. And that was a huge challenge to get them to be able to do guided reading, to work with small groups on a daily basis. I'm not sure if that happened all the time. In most cases, it didn't. And it was like people just said it's an unprecedented year. You do the best that you can do. But those kids are going to go back next year and they're going to suffer because they missed out. And it's not their fault, but there will be need for support, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that if this pandemic has shown us anything, is that we actually have hope to, have our kids work a little bit more independent. It's shown them that, it's important to be independent. But You know, as you pointed out, you know, you have all the different types of personalities, and you know, how do you assess online and so forth. But the in the system that the secondary system is unfortunately, you know, we're in a quadmester system, and you know, those of you who did see it, that there was a big, you know, a large protest from parents and students saying that they don't want to go back to the quadmester system, because what you're doing, and you know, you multiply this with the online learning, is that you're compressing, you know, course material into a very short time. So and it's going to have you know, an adverse effect. So you're only, you know, 110 hours a course. You know, it's about 10 weeks. So you're really you know, time is scarce here. So you know, compared to you know, an online course, a whole year course, you know, a non-semestered. So studies have actually shown that students generally tend to do a lot better if they're if they're in school throughout the entire year, as opposed to, you know, a block of a shorter period of time. So, you know, there are just fewer hours of instruction, and then you have to compress everything. You multiply that with the online environment, then it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, one thing I just want to mention, like, you know, from a student's perspective, is like the importance of extracurriculars. Like, because, you know, for me, like in my undergrad, like since I was in first year, like, you know, I did Model UN, I did like, you know, joined a lot of clubs. And like, for me, that was really fun, not only because, you know, I got to make a lot of friends there, but because it also related to my academics, right? So like a lot of the stuff in like my law and policy classes, we would already be talking about in like Model UN, or we would talk about the World Health Organization. I think also for a lot of students, like, you know, it was kind of like once you were done your classes, it kind of gave you something to look forward to, like whether it just be like sports, right? And I think for a lot of people this year, we didn't necessarily get those opportunities. And so not only are we missing out on socialization, but a lot of the soft skills too, like public speaking, that was so important, because that's something you can develop through extracurriculars. You also build like confidence through extracurriculars, and, you know, like it does set you back a bit. And I think like that was something that it's really important, and it just makes going to school also more fun, right? You get to see people after in student clubs and sports. And so I just want to say, from like a student's perspective, that's like one thing that like I really miss the most from online.
Yeah. We did have some extracurricular activities, like a reach for the top and debate, but like everything else, it was strictly online, and it was sort of scaled down.
Mm-hmm,
But,
for sure.
But it's not quite the same, right? So
yeah. Okay, so and now the next question, I'll turn it over to Mitzie. So what policies could the government adopt to support parents and kids during remote or hybrid learning?
Sure. I mean, so I want to touch on the new math curriculum, because I think, you know, if I was a teacher or a student, you know, entering grade 9 for the first time, destreamed, you know, it's wide open. And I think that people are excited about the new curriculum in terms of its content. It has an emphasis, for instance, on culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy in math. So, you know, really looking at, you know, an anti-racist, a more inclusive way of teaching mathematics in Ontario. And so translating that into an online and hybrid model environment, plus a new curriculum, plus a destreamed environment, plus the gaps, you know, that have been created from COVID, I think it is going to make for, you know, a challenging environment, but one in which, you know, I believe in our education system. You know, as the former Minister of Education, I've seen our education system in every part of this province, including in York Region. I spent a lot of time in York Region in all 4 boards. And so, you know, I believe that, you know, our teachers, the ones on this panel and their colleagues will do what is required to make this not a lost year for students, right? And I've seen that they've worked themselves to exhaustion in the challenging environment that we're in. And, you know, we talked about, you know, the resources and the tools for online. You know, I certainly saw the board that represents, you know, students in my riding make sure that every student had a device. And then it was about, okay, how do you connect that device? And they made sure that there was connectivity to the device. So there's a lot of problem solving and troubleshooting that has happened. So I do think that the system having, you know, I would say it's moved away from sort of the remoteness of the learning to online learning as, you know, a reality to cope with COVID, and people have adjusted to support students and their learning. So as we move forward, as long as we have equity built into the students' learning, and that we are preparing them, you know, certainly for the world ahead. Online is a part of that. In the new math curriculum, there's an emphasis on innovation, coding, digitization. You know, I would be very excited as a student, you know, coming into grade 9, you know, sort of throwing off the restraints of COVID and being confronted with a brand new curriculum. I know that there's a lot of work happening in the background, despite the fact that the government has not provided direction. But, you know, our education system is an excellent one, and I believe in our teachers and in their professional, just in their professionalism and their abilities to teach our students. And so whatever the context, if it is online because of the health risk, or a hybrid combination, or, you know, hopefully it's much more you know, in person. I'm also hopeful that we incorporate very broadly Indigenous curriculum, Indigenous ways of teaching and learning as well, because we have a lot to learn in that regard. And there's an opportunity right now for us to do that. It's actually just in looking at the math curriculum, the new one for 2021, it's actually part of the curriculum expectation and guidance. So, you know, that's progress. That's, you know, to me, showing that, you know, we are at a time in Ontario where we're really embracing what is happening around us and putting students at the center of learning, which is where it always ought to be. I don't know if anyone's watched TVO lately, but, you know, normally I tune into the agenda and that's it. But for some reason this week, I think I was looking for the soccer, and I ended up on Channel 2, and there was, in the middle of the day, a learning program, you know, and there was some form, I don't know if it was a teacher that was there, but, you know, there was certainly, she was breaking down a lesson on television. And, you know, I was surprised because I hadn't seen that type of content was being delivered by TVO. And I know that there is skepticism from teachers and from you know, their representatives about that. You know, I served on the board of TVO for 6 years, so I know that there is value in TVO as a partner, but not to replace the classroom teacher. You know, the importance of that sort of method of learning of you know, I mean, listen to our panel. They're talking about, you know, I see something, you know, in terms of the physical response to the learning. And I know what you're talking about. I've visited schools and I've seen that physical response from students as they are learning. And, you know, unless we're going to find a way to do that through the television or do that through the computer for every student, which we're not there yet. We still need that in-person engagement, and that, you know, particularly for those students who need more assistance. You know, there are lots of students, for whatever the spectrum of ability is, that need that support, and we should make sure that that they have you know, that full support of their classroom teacher and a learning environment that supports their needs.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I'll turn it over to Kadira to ask this question. And then we're just gonna wrap up, answer any outstanding questions. So yeah.
Well, the next question is a follow-up, basically, in terms of support. So Mitzie, is there any strategy for transitioning special needs children?
Yeah, and that's an area that we've struggled during COVID with. How do we support you know, students with special needs, you know, whatever the special needs are, or students with disabilities. I mean, our school system, one of the amazing things about our school system is that, you know, every student, even if they're in hospital, they have a right to learn and to their education, and we bring the learning to them. And so, you know, with COVID, you know, some of that has not been, you know, delivered fully, right? Because we've had to worry about people's health, particularly of students, if they have any sort of, you know, vulnerability that we have to make sure is protected. So we need to invest in you know, the assessment side of things as students return, hopefully, to in-person learning in the fall, making sure that we know where the needs are, where the support is required. I'm already hearing, and maybe our panel could, you know, validate this, but I'm already hearing requests for more educational supports, more adults in the classrooms and in schools to support students, whether those are tutors or EAs, or, you know, some sort of resource or support for that student. Mental health resources are also in demand. I don't know if you've seen the data coming out of Kids Help Phone. There's been an exponential demand for mental health resources for students. I'm very sad to say that, you know, the rate of suicide amongst young people has increased during the pandemic, and that is an absolute tragedy when we think about, you know, our precious youth in this province and not feeling that they have enough supports in their lives. And so this is another area that we have to also pay attention to for all students, that they get those resources, and that we invest in those resources for students at this time. It's, you know, it is going to take, it's not about, you know, 8 weeks of summer and then going, you know, back to school and everything is behind us. It is going to take time to recover and to heal from this pandemic. And therefore, we should be paying attention to the needs of students and how schools and the school environment, the learning environment has been affected, how it will be changed forever because of this pandemic, that hopefully we all survive. And so there is a lot ahead of us. I think it is, the recovery, in my view, in this area is just beginning, and there's much more work ahead of us. But as I said, I want to be optimistic because I do believe in our public education system, and I know that we're going to do it, and do it together, and do it well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And do any of the teachers want to add anything?
Yeah, well, students with IEPs in the secondary system, one of the things that we were trying to do is if they weren't successful in a couple of courses or so, we would try to get them signed up for a credit recovery for the summer. so that way they could recover that course if they didn't quite get it. So, but again, that normally depends on it's contingent on the grades as well too. So it might be the student might have been short of 1 or 2 assignments or so forth. So rather than having the repeated as well too. So with students with IEPs in the secondary level, we try to watch their credit accumulation to make sure they don't fall too behind.
Can I just also,
Yeah,
sorry, Chris, are you finished? I also want to say that maybe it's also the time to suspend or to make it applicable, that 5-year sort of cap from a funding perspective at the board level, that students have to complete all their credits within that sort of time frame, given the fact that the pandemic no one predicted it would have lasted this long, and and it has delayed some students. So give them the time without worrying about whether this is going to be covered by the board or the ministry, and just allow students the time and space that they need to do the catch up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, guys. The last question that I have, and I'll ask all of you panelists, is what can parents do to help support their children? So right now is summer, and I think right now could be a good time for parents, to help their students out who are, either students who are going from elementary to high school to university, or still in elementary or high school. So maybe if you guys could just offer some tips. I know like there's some parents in the audience that we have here. So maybe Nasim, you can offer for elementary, and then Mirza and Chris, you could talk about high school, and then Mitzie, you can finish it off talking generally for all students.
Okay, so I think that for sure parents should, if they can, spend as much time with your kids as you can. Go outside with them. Like, they've missed out a huge chunk of time, and just that socialization with the outside world. As things open up, take them out, let them experience things. In terms of reading, I think it's an awesome idea to let them read every single day. There's online books, you can get books from. Reading is going to help them in all subject areas. So if they can at least do that, maybe, and then discuss it. What did you read? What was it like? What did you get out of it? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? Get them to think. I think that would be very helpful too. But most importantly, just as things open up, get them to socialize. I say cut down on the screen time. Cut down on the screen time, more together time, more outside time if they have friends, socialize. I mean, we're starting, all the extracurriculars were gone and all the socialization was gone. And kids, and I know in my class, were very sad to have the last meet. So they want to meet people. They want to talk to people. And if it's with their family, even games night, like play games. Board games are awesome to generate conversations, anything like that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Mirza, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I would say that if the parents can start helping them set up a nice work study environment for them. If this pandemic has taught us anything, it's taught the students how to be much more independent with their own learning. So if they have a nice, clean, organized space, laptop capacities or internet capacities, and just ask them to look at the gaps, or just try to recognize the gaps that they've encountered this year with the online learning. And maybe there's tons of resources online. So whatever gaps they might have encountered, they might want to just encourage their children, go online, pull up 1 or 2 resources, try to look it over, at least keep your brain refreshed. So when September comes around, at least you'll be able to recognize where your difficulties were, and then continue going forward from there. So just keep the pace going. Don't just leave it because it's the summertime.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, maybe perhaps communicate with the subject teacher to see where some of those gaps might be in the reporting period, and try to engage in some sort of informal learning at home, whether or not that might be reading X number of books throughout the summer as well. But, you know, I think as you sort of mentioned, as things are starting to open up a little bit more, and if you want to move away from the stiffness of or the confinement of the online learning, you know, luckily, you know, we live in the city of Toronto and GTA, and there's a lot of cultural capital in our city. So maybe, you know, a trip to the theater, a trip to the museum or the gallery, or the aquarium, right? There's a lot of stuff to read there, right? And a lot of stuff to take in. And, you know, it's, you know, just one or 2 days, right, throughout, you can make it you know, a great outing, an educational experience as well as an entertaining experience as well, too. And it pretty much will cover most of the curriculum as well, too. As things start opening up, it might be at capacity, but there's still a lot to see.
Perfect.
Great. Can I just add one thing? Sorry. I just wanted to add that I think another great idea is to set some goals up. So together, write down some goals, think about what you want to do, really self-reflect. How did this year go? And what changes do I want to make in the upcoming year? So that's piece of self-reflection I think is huge, and it'll help grow as a student, as a person too. So just that whole piece of setting some goals and reflecting is good to do as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then Mitzie, do you have anything you'd like to add as well?
You're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was just saying how I really love that goal setting, and just reflecting on the past year, and just, you know, I also think that, you know, and I think someone mentioned it earlier, that students have learned a lot more independence and self-directed learning, and that's a really good thing for them. And so to recognize that in them, you know, and that's a good thing that they'll need in terms of life skills. But I am a real champion of literacy. And so today, these are not the books, I left them in the car, I realized, but you know, I always have a collection of, and I really would say to parents to, you know, bring these in a fun way into the students so that there's no learning loss, right? That they keep those skills, those reading skills, those math skills. We have a new math with a new math curriculum starting in grade 9, but there's also a new math curriculum for elementary school. Read it. Go on the ministry site. I'll put it in the chat, the link, and just familiarize yourself with, you know, how students will be taught and what's going to be happening with their learning, so that you can be engaged, because it's very different than when we were in school, right? So it is an opportunity, and I find it really exciting, you know, when I hear the language that the ministry is using to describe how we're learning math, financial literacy. You know, that was something that as liberals we can be very, very proud of. You know, we were the ones to introduce, you know, at the high school level, financial literacy, and to develop that through a pilot project, and then to have a grade 10 curriculum. Now this is now being moved into an integrated way into the grade 9 curriculum, which is very, very good. That's a life skill that will help our students, and that you can incorporate into sort of just everyday conversations about money and what it means and value, and all of those things can be done in a fun way over the summer. Have fun. Do not forget to have fun this summer. You know, we all need to have a break after surviving, you know, the last year and a half of COVID, and taking care of our mental health and our well-being, and you know, young people need that as well. So I would say also take the time to have fun and take a break.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. So I'll just stop sharing my screen. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining, to our panelists, to Nasim, to Mirza, to Chris, to Mitzie, as well as Kadira for being an amazing co-host. And for all of you guys just coming out here today. I think it's just really important that we're all talking about this, right? Because I think that's the first step. Like, if we're all in a room talking about it, all of us here have different perspectives. Like, I'm bringing the student's perspective in university. And I think like it's really nice to have this kind of conversation, because then, people can talk about it with their parents, with their kids, with their friends. And I think that's the important part here. So thank you guys for coming. I really enjoyed speaking with all of you and hearing what everyone had to say. And, I hope that the children in the fall can return and have a great year.
And thank you, Hannah and Gadira. You were wonderful hosts. And Jan for creating the space for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, thank you guys so much. And I look forward to seeing you guys. So bye.
Thanks for everything.
Thank you.
And get your vaccines, everyone.